A year ago, a massive fire swept through Cape Town, ravaging different structures of Cape Town University, including the iconic university's iconic library. The Jagger reading room was home to the African Studies collection, started in 1953. To tell us more of where they are at 1 year on, we're joined virtually by Executive Director at UCT Libraries, by Ujala Satgoo. Ujala, thank you so much for your time this evening. A year on, can you take us back just for a minute to that day when you realized the extent of the damage of what this fire was about to do?
Thank you, Marcel, for having me on your show. And I must admit that it is an extremely poignant moment to relive, considering the scale of the disaster that confronted us on 18th April. It was a very beautiful autumn day in Cape Town, as we generally experience. However, on that particular day, the speed of the wind and the rate and the wind, etc., exacerbated the situation. And of course, as everybody knows, several buildings at UCT were impacted. Unfortunately, the Jagger library seemed to have been in the path of these flying embers, and the roof caught alight. And obviously, a library is a fire's delight. And considering the layout of that particular reading room, you had a double volume center space together with wood and paper. And so it just thrived, the fire thrived. And by the end of the day, we knew that the Jagger reading room was completely lost to us, and whatever was in that room was completely destroyed. However, the intensity of the fire necessitated the use of a lot of water that subsequently flooded our basements. And so we were confronted with a second disaster when we gained access to the building on Tuesday, the 20th of April. And we then took the decision to remove every item as soon as possible so that we could not incur further damage. And
Ujala, before you take us through that process, because I do want to get to that, but let's take it step by step.
Sure.
Because obviously you and your team would have looked at these flames engulfing the Jagger room, and just going by friends who've studied at UCT and the reaction on social media when it was evident that the Jagger room was the one that was affected. Really, the outpouring of emotion of what that library and that space meant to not just the people who worked there, but the generations of students who have worked there or have gone through the halls or sat at the tables. It was just so genuine, and you could tell this wasn't just some ordinary library. It also housed the African Studies collection with priceless content that would have been affected as well. What kind of emotions did you go through when you and your team stepped in there, knowing how important that space was to so many people?
At a personal level, I think, Marcel, for me, as I stood on the plaza watching this beautiful, elegant library burn, was truly a gutting feeling. You know, I stood at watching it, feeling a sense of shock, horror, and complete helplessness, because there was nothing we could do. However, after a few minutes, you know, immediately the adrenaline kicks in, and the one refrain in my head was, what do we do next? How do we recover from this? And so too with my colleagues, my fellow directors, and my facilities staff who were on site. The one saving grace for us at that point, and we were looking for things to clutch onto, was when I spoke to the team leader of the firefighters and asked him about the basements, and he looked at me with complete shock and asked, what basements? And I said, we've got 2 basements under this building, and can you please check if the contents are safe? And so he comes back later with my facilities team and confirms that the fire hadn't reached the basement. So on Sunday, when we returned home, we knew that the basements were safe. However, it was another story. So at a professional level for us, obviously, it represented decades of work that was put into this library to build the collections. And aside from creating the space for research and for learning. And we were introducing undergraduates into that space as well. So they were engaging with primary materials as well. So aside from hosting the archives, and as you rightfully mentioned, it did house the a unique African Studies collection, the African Films collection, government publications from several African countries. So what was lost was decades of hard work, decades of dedicated and focused collection building and management. And as we looked at this and as we assessed it and as we retrieved materials from the basement, we offset what was lost against what we were able to salvage and save. But in terms of the losses that we incurred, some of it is definitely gone forever. But we are committed to rebuilding whatever we can at this stage.
Now, you and your team obviously have a certain set of expertise. Would that have included how to go about salvaging, doing remedial work, evacuating very important documents like that? Or did you have to get that expertise in? Because it was quite a job that laid ahead of you, wasn't it?
It certainly was, Marcel, and you really got it very right, because we were ill-prepared for it, actually. Ill-prepared, I think, as an institution, as a region, and as a country for something of this scale. And that is why we are also hugely concerned about what's happening at the National Assembly. However, the urgency actually precipitated the kind of response we put into place. We took on board Professional Salvage, a company that was recommended to us for the professional salvage. We had a body of retired and currently in job placement conservators who came together voluntarily to come and assist us. We had our project management in place from the university as well as the libraries project management team. So we brought together and actually pulled together our years of experience and guided by a team, a professional reference group, guided by international disaster salvage protocols, and these are widely available through several library associations, etc. So we had to learn on the job, but I think having a common goal assisted us very much in realizing that goal.
One final question before I let you go, because we have run out of time. I read in a statement that you about 13,000 crates of material was extracted from that immediate grouping of work or that you were able to conserve, and it was sprayed with an antifungal solution. It was clean wrapped and put into a deep freeze. 13,000 crates, that's a lot. What is your next step now in this process?
Okay, not all 13,000 crates are in deep cold storage. I would say at this point we have about 800 crates in deep storage, and that will be taken through a very dedicated conservation process, which is called vacuum freeze drying. And so we're awaiting the delivery of those freeze dryers from the US, and hopefully it would land here in South Africa on the 1st of May. The other aspects of remedial conservation that has happened was the dehumidifying, the drying of materials, making sure mold doesn't persist. We've also embarked on the conservation and restoration project of our audiovisual materials that were severely impacted by water. And so that is currently on the go at the moment. We are now able to put together the collections that were disparately distributed across the university. We've consolidated them. We now see the emergence of collections, albeit in crates. And so the process is ongoing, Marcel. This is a multi-year project. Remember, we have got 2 basements of materials. We've got maps, we've got pamphlets, we've got stationery that has to be replaced, archival stationery. And at this point in time, it is my team that's working on it. The volunteers have all gone back, and it is the dedicated team of special collections at UCT Libraries that's working on this. But I can say definitely that it has been an amazing journey, and we have at the moment a wonderful exhibition on a tribute to the human spirit that allowed us to achieve what we did. And I invite those in Cape Town who were volunteers, come and share your moments with us and view the exhibition, as you see in my background of my particular picture. So thank you for having me on tonight.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for sharing so openly about what this process has entailed, both professionally and personally. That's the Executive Director at UCT Libraries, Ujala Satgoo, joining us there from Cape Town. What a lot of work they've been through in the last year since we watched those buildings go up in flames.